I'm Bertram Souza, veteran Mahoning Valley journalist, welcoming you to another edition of the Scribbler podcast. During my 40 years with the now closed Youngstown Vindicator, I wrote over 1,600 columns, 300 of which are contained in a book titled No Holds Barred. It can be purchased online at scribblergroup.com or at Barnes & Noble in Boardman. Although Women's History Month has passed, the trail blazed by many women will continue to inspire others. One such trail is the historic appointment of Dr. Cynthia Anderson as president of the 116-year-old Youngstown State University. Dr. Anderson is not only the first woman to lead the four-year institution of higher learning, she is the first graduate of Youngstown State to serve as president. Under her leadership, YSU was able to ride out the financial enrollment storms that have been battering colleges and universities in Ohio and around the country. To be sure, Cynthia Anderson was forced to contend with opposition from faculty over contract negotiations and displeasure over her refusal to speak out against a law pushed through by Republican Governor John Kasich and GOP-controlled General Assembly. The law would have stripped the state's 350,000 public employees of most of the collective bargaining rights and forced workers to pay at least 15% of their healthcare costs. Ohio voters in a referendum overwhelmingly rejected the Republican law. But the turmoil during Anderson's tenure pales in comparison to what's going on at YSU today with the controversial and inexplicable appointment of former Republican Congressman Bill Johnson, a non-academic right-wing Donald Trump apologist, as president. The fact that the trustees surrounded the appointment in secrecy continues to undermine theirs and Johnson's credibility. I've invited Dr. Cynthia Anderson, whom I've known for many years, to join me today to talk about her deep roots in the Mahoning Valley and her ties to YSU, and to share her views on what has transpired on campus. Thank you, Cindy, for joining me today. I'm glad we've finally been able to spend some time chatting about an issue that's near and dear to your heart, Youngstown State University. But let's start with this. What have you been doing since you retired in June of 2013 it was?
2013, right.
After 3 years as president?
Yes.
What have you been doing?
Well, my husband and I actually had a home built here in Boulder City, Nevada, which is about, I'm going to say 25 minutes from the Las Vegas Strip. We had it built in 2003, beginning of 2004. We had people out here to take care of it. And so we ultimately moved in December of 2013. My husband moved his business out here. He's very crazy busy. In a million years, we never thought he would be this busy, but he has hit the ground running and he's doing that. In the meantime, I got myself involved on every, I'll say, organization and board that Boulder City has. I'm on the credit union board, and we joined Rotary, and I was Rotary president for a year, and the Hotel and Museum Association, and the Lend a Hand Association, and the Hospital Foundation, and the hospital itself. I'm on that board. So yeah, I have meetings every single day. So that's what I've been doing. And
you realize that's not the definition of retirement, right?
And everybody in Boulder City that I talk to says, you have failed miserably at retirement. And that's true. So
do you regret your decision to leave YSU?
I miss the university, and I most certainly miss all of those wonderful people tremendously. Yes. And do I regret? No, we have a wonderful life out here. Las Vegas is this glamour and glitzy city. However, there are things about Youngstown, and realize there are about, I'm going to say 250, 260 people in the Henderson, Las Vegas, Boulder City area that are from the Youngstown area. Oh. And we all say we miss the same things. And we don't realize in Youngstown the great food that we have. Right, and the churches that you have and the camaraderie. It's very different out here. So that's the part that I do miss. Yes.
So what prompted your retirement? What happened?
Well, if you would, and you can't talk to him, Suter Shingarg,
Yes.
he would tell you that I had indicated during interviews that I was going to balance the budget, and Brian and I already had this home built. So, and after that, I had my 35 years. Actually, I hit my 35-year mark with STRS during faculty negotiations in 2008. So it was time. It was time. So
Okay. As the first woman to serve as YSU's president in the history of the university, and the first graduate of the university to hold that top position, you not only blazed a trail, but actually smashed the glass ceiling. Talk about your journey to be queen of the hill, as I call you.
well, I went to YSU as an undergrad, and the story there was, that was during the turbulent times of the late 60s and early 70s. The joke with my father was that I had two choices to go to college. One of them was Youngstown State, and one of them was the University of Berkeley, where they were having all these demonstrations and all this fun. And my dad said, "I will cut you out of the will if that's where you decide." So it was Youngstown State for sure, but I never intended to go anywhere but Youngstown State. YSU actually had the major that I wanted. So I graduated in business education and technology, moved to Columbus, taught high school for 6 years at Westerville South High School, got my master's degree there, moved again out to California. And then there was a job that came up at Youngstown State in the business ed and tech department, which was in a 2-year school, remember?
Right.
And the department chairman at the time, I called her and I said, is there a possibility? And she said, absolutely. I could teach shorthand, typing, accounting, all the business topics. So actually applied over the phone, got the job, came back as a temporary professor, and then that stayed. Well, then, if you remember, Jim Scanlon and Les Cochran came in 1990.
Right.
And Jim Scanlon was going to hire 2 associate provosts or assistant provosts, and he was going to hire them internally. Well, you can't trust those administrators at universities. So all of us said, they're not going to hire internally. We never do that. So some of us even had a money bet, and said, this isn't going to happen. And so several people applied. I was one who applied, and the secretary, Jim Scanlon's secretary, Marlene Daly, called me one day and she said, Cindy, Dr. Scanlon would like to interview you on Friday at 1:00 in the afternoon. And I said, Marlene, I golf at 1:00 in the afternoon. Faculty leave. I'm not coming. She goes, yes, you are. Just be there at work. Well, I went. And I didn't get to say a word. He did all the talking. So 2 weeks later, Marlene calls again and said, Cindy, Dr. Scanlon would like to meet with you at 1:00 in the afternoon on Friday. I said, Marlene, what do I do on Friday at 1:00? I'm not coming. Well, again, I did. I got to talk a little bit that time. And then the third time he said, how would you like to be the assistant provost for academic planning? And I said, absolutely not. We had a bet going that you guys were going to hire from outside. I want this job. All I ever wanted to do was teach. So he talked me into it. So we got through that.
Yeah.
That was a great decision, because the deal with Dr. Scanlon, though, was that I still wanted to teach at least one course. All I ever wanted to do in life was teach. Then I was made the vice president for student affairs. And loved every minute of that, loved being with those students, because that's what it was all about. And then I was nominated, as my understanding, by lots of people to be the president of the university. So,
where did you get your PhD from?
The University of Akron in
Oh,
educational administration, EDD, yes. Mhm.
Your position as Vice President of Student Affairs was what
Mhm.
grounded you, I believe, of knowing your background, to not only to the university, but to the students themselves, and gave you a sense of what was important for students as far as being on a 4-year institution of higher education, right?
Yes, it's interesting that it used to be that the path to follow was you needed to be a faculty member, then you needed to be something in academics, a provost, and then that got you into the role of a president. I would have to say that there was nothing better than being the vice president for student affairs and that moving into the presidency, because I did get to know the students. I got to know their needs, their wants, and I was very active as VP student affairs and went to student groups and talked to them. They came into my office and had great ideas, and we implemented many of them.
Right.
And I think that that's what a president should be doing, is listening to the constituency that's actually has chosen that institution to attend. They have lots of choices. So I was very privileged.
And before we are going to get into a lot of that about the nuts and bolts of higher education, but your roots in the Mahoning Valley run deep, and as in fact, your relationship with the now closed Youngstown Vindicator
Yeah.
has been long standing. And so let's talk about all of that, your roots in the Valley and your dad, whom I
Yeah.
knew. So yeah, give us some of that background.
Well, I went to, it was first Fowler High School, and then it changed to Matthews High School when we consolidated. And my parents and my aunt and uncle owned a lake, Mineral Springs Lake, and it was only supposed to be open 1 year. My grandfather wanted it open for 1 year. So we built a bathhouse and pavilions and concession stand and all of that. And I think I told you before, and 32 years later, we closed it. So, a good plan anyway.
Yeah.
But the Vindicator actually had many parties at the lake. But before that, they had their picnics at Arrowhead Lake, I believe it was called. And, Bill Brown was there, and he showered people with food and gifts, and you never left one of those picnics without you had arms full of just goodies and everything. So those were a lot of fun. Then those were continued down at my mom and dad's lake, and it was always, let me see, Leo Gilboy, Neil Cable,
Sure.
I even wrote some Ed Turgovac, Jack Ralston, Denny Riley. Oh my goodness.
But there's
They
a
would
reason. There's a reason for that, and that is your dad.
Yeah.
He
He
worked.
got along. Yeah.
How many
He
years did he work at the Vindicator?
44 years.
44. Yeah.
And I'm very proud, Bertram, that when my dad passed in 2000, he had about 1,100 people walk past his casket. 500 of those came from Youngstown State, and about 350 came from the Vindicator. It was just unbelievable. Everyone showed up. But yeah, they had a big time planning those picnics, and my mom would do a lot of cooking, and they would come to our house and heat stuff up. And I'm going to tell you, those men used more garlic than you could ever imagine. Our house smelled like garlic for weeks. It was hysterical, but a lot of fun. Yes.
When I came to Youngstown in 1979, after I got my master's at Marquette, of course, your dad was one of the managers, and he and I got to know each other. And like other longtime Vindicator staffers, he knew a lot of people and he knew a lot of connections. And I found that I needed to talk to people like your dad and others like Ed and everybody, like even Mr. Brown and Betty and all of that, because I was not from here. And so I needed to know who the players were, who the connections were, what was going on. And I learned a lot from them. I absolutely did. And so I always liked your dad. I mean, there were times, I mean, he was a taskmaster, if you want to call that. But
Yep, I can relate. Yes.
but and I was pleased to have worked with him and others from the old school. We considered them the old school, and then all of a sudden one day I became part of that old school, and then I didn't realize it.
What year did you come to the Vindicator?
In 79.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was a strike. I'm sure you heard all about
Oh,
it. A
yes.
strike in 1964.
Yes.
And my father honored the picket line, and and he was management, but he respected those men. And the interesting thing is that every day and every evening, we probably had about 20 to 25 men come to our home, and my mother cooked for them, and they talked about what are we going to do. And many of them did retire at the time because they needed to, and several of them moved out to Las Vegas, and that was one of the heartbreaking times in my dad's professional career. But he loved that Vindicator.
And then obviously when I was there was another strike, and that lasted 9 months, and that was very unfortunate, because I believe that was the beginning of the end of the newspaper, because once we started losing circulation and advertising, it was going to be an impossible task to win back those readers and those advertisers. And so, that thus began the demise of this 150-year-old newspaper that was very much an important part of the community. And
it was the community. Yes. Yep. Yeah. And don't quote me on this, but my father kept one of the newspapers for the longest period of time, and it was the newspaper after Christmas, when people were putting in the Christmas, after Christmas sales and everything. And he was so proud of it because it was 368 pages long.
Yes.
It was huge. So
right.
he had that souvenir.
I know. But given your roots in the Valley, did you ever consider moving out of the area, moving somewhere else, and pursuing your career in academia in some other part of the country?
No, there was only one time that I went and interviewed elsewhere, and that was, when Dr. Sweet came in. Oftentimes presidents bring in their own people, and none of us knew what was going to happen. And I wanted to be in academia, and so I interviewed out here. Actually was offered the job, but the lady that I was interviewing with, the president of the university that I was interviewing with, she had started her career at Ohio University. And so, I only went because just in case I was going to be replaced, I wanted to have a position somewhere. But that's the only time. Other than that, nope. Youngstown State was my family. They were my friends. I had no intention of ever leaving. Never.
So when you were appointed president in 2010 by the Board of Trustees, it was a very open public process. In fact, not only did you meet with the campus community, you met with members of the community at large of the Mahoning Valley. And I was in one of those public gatherings where you sort of opened yourself up to questions from the audience, and I asked you a couple of questions because I'd known you a long time. But did you feel additional weight on your shoulders because of being the first female being considered president?
I felt that I had to prove myself more than a male would have. And please, this is not meant to be in any way disparaging to males, females, anything. Right. I felt that I had to prove myself for several reasons. First of all, everybody knew me. I was homegrown. I was there. So everybody knew the good, the bad, and the ugly about Cynthia Anderson. If somebody from the outside comes in, they're on their best behavior. So you basically, a little bit about them, but boy, these folks knew everything about me. So they also knew that I started my career out basically as a typing teacher. So, you had to worry about the fact that people were going to say, well, she can't be president. She's a typing teacher. And so, okay, well, fine and dandy. Here's an example. Right off the bat, the day that I took office, an individual who will remain, is not with us anymore, but remain nameless, came into my office and wanted to talk for a while. Well, 3 hours later, okay. I was told, number one, you smile too much. You absolutely cannot smile. It shows weakness. Number two was I paid way too much attention to students, that's not what the presidency is all about, that I needed to focus on many other things besides students, so on. And thirdly, that I wore bright colored clothes and that I should really be wearing navy blue suits and all of that. That every single one of those things goes against every ounce of my being. You know, if I had to change myself into somebody that I wasn't, nothing that I was going to do would ever be genuine. So the very first picture that I had taken, and it's on the front of a magazine, I was standing in the middle with a really, really bright red dress on, and I was surrounded by students, and I had this absolutely huge smile on my face. And I had gone home that day that we had this chat and threw away my only navy blue suit. Now, I didn't do any of that to be spiteful, but that's not what makes a good university president. That's not what defines you. So I did that for myself more than anything else.
And by the way, I think I know who that individual was. Because there were times when he would call me about you. And,
yeah, okay, whatever. I'm telling you.
You know, it was, I think it was well intentioned, but I think
yeah,
it was old school.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't realize how the times had changed when the university hired you as its president. That this was a new era at
very new. But I guess what I kept thinking of, Bertram, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but what I kept thinking of is that nobody ever would have gone to a male and done that very same thing. They never would have done that. He wouldn't have either. So I didn't take offense to it. I just wanted to make sure in my mind, no, I am all about students. That is what a university is all about. The color of my clothes, unless I dress really goofy, like I can come on here, and I am going to smile because I'm happy. So, oh my God.
I'll tell you, and he's passed now, and he's no longer with us. But even to the very end, I used to go and have lunch with him, and because we kept in touch, and he would still talk about a couple of issues that he had with you, and he wanted something done, and you couldn't have it, couldn't do it, and he would start raging, and I'd laugh and I'd say, God, would you let it go?
Let it go. Good wording. And wonderful person. Wonderful.
Yes, and very well intentioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the university. He really did. And
yes.
So,
and loved Youngstown. Yes.
Yes, he did. I recall women, young women in particular, were inspired by your story and your success. What advice would you have been giving, young women, especially young female students on campus, regarding how to maneuver in this male-dominated sort of profession?
Well, first of all, I would go back to what I said earlier. I think you've got to be yourself, and you've got to know what your priorities are from day one. Again, I never wanted to do anything but teach, but also those students were first and foremost in everything I did, every decision I made. So they have to have that in their heart. And if they're more interested in something else, then that probably is not the career path for them to take. I wasn't interested in having my name up on a billboard or on a wall or on a building or on a street. You have to do things because you believe that they're the right things to do. And you also have to be accountable. And I think that that accountability goes a long way. I'll tell you why I think that, because something happened when I was VP for Student Affairs. And of course, we had to cut the budget. We always had to cut the budget.
Right.
And so we had a women's center in Kilcawley Center, and that was an easy target. And I went to my staff, and they said, yeah, we can, shuffle out some of those responsibilities elsewhere. Well, so I announced that the Women's Center was going to be closed. It was the following day when I had about, I'm going to say 20 women at my office door wanting to talk. And that was great. I didn't mind that at all. That was the right thing to do. And we did talk. And when we talked, they told me things that, shame on me, I never knew about the Women's Center, about the needs, so on and so forth. So immediately, they weren't out of my office for a half hour, and I reinstated the Women's Center. The Jambar came over and wanted to know what had happened, and I told them the exact story I just said to you. And I said, I am the only one to blame for this. Don't put this on anyone else. I'm totally accountable and responsible for taking that action. It was wrong. And you can probably look up the Jambar, but I wasn't afraid to be accountable. And I think that as females, you have to make sure that you're ready for those criticisms and take them in stride, just, as the dress and the smile and everything, you take it in stride, and you stay with your own values, morals, ethics, and all, and you go forward. Unfortunately, I think that too many females think they have to change. They have to change themselves in order to be great leaders, and they don't. If they have it in here, they will become great leaders if they follow what they believe in. And that's what I've tried to do. I know I've made a lot of missteps, but that's okay. Everybody does.
Yeah, and so we're talking about missteps. While you did enjoy wide support on and off campus because of who you were, because of your background, because of being local and all of that, you did have to deal with some labor turmoil when you were president, and also some harsh criticism over your refusal to publicly oppose Senate
Bill 5. I knew you were going to say that.
The Republican anti-union bill.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that. Talk about what went through your mind, what was going on, the faculty issues and the negotiations, and then Senate Bill 5. Go into some detail with that, because I find that fascinating.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. And this is one of the first opportunities I've ever had to come clean with this, because if you want people to reiterate my story and to prove that what I'm saying is true, you can contact Jean Grilly, you can contact Ikram Khawaja. They're going to tell you the same story. I did oppose Senate Bill 5. What I didn't do was get in front of the faculty and blast out to the world that I was opposing it. There was a real good reason for that, and we were basically worried about getting punished for not supporting it, and punished by those in the upper echelon of Ohio. Trying to be really nice here. So there was we had IUC meetings all the time. We talked about, people, there's only one person in all of IUC that was in favor of SB 5. So we would talk about, okay, here's how you can change things. And I kept saying, we've had negotiations on our campus for years. They work. Yes, we disagree, and then we go have a beer together. What is wrong with that? And, other people echoed the very same thing. Well, So Bruce Johnson, who was the head of IUC, took all this information down, and then they came up with a statement that they were going to put into the newspaper, into the Vindicator, all of the newspapers.
Right.
And this time it was a telephone conversation with all of the presidents. 20 minutes before that telephone conversation, we got a copy of what they were going to publish. Well, it was myself, Jean Grilly, Ikram Kouaja in this telephone meeting, and there was nothing in this statement that we had agreed to. Nothing. Bruce Johnson said, so I want everybody to take a look at the statement, and we'll go forward, putting it into the newspapers. And everybody was quiet. And finally, I looked over at Ikram Kouaja and I said, I'm not doing this. And I said, Bruce, Youngstown, do not put Youngstown State University's name on this article. Do not send this out. This is not what we talked about. This is not what we agreed to. So he said, well, are there changes? I said, this whole thing, this makes no sense. And again, you can probably get the tape recording of this meeting, I would assume. I don't know. Everybody else jumped in, except for 5 presidents that thought they could fix it. Mm-hmm. There was no fixing of it. You had to rewrite the whole thing. Now, let's take that down to the Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
Okay, the Chamber of Commerce was going to vote to approve SB 5. Well, there were 3 of us who said absolutely not, and I was one of those 3. As a big rat was being pulled up the street outside of the window of the Chamber of Commerce. So, no, I think I understood what the governor needed to accomplish. That was not the way to do it. That just was not the way to do it.
And the governor himself, after that, because remember, he made the push for SB 5, right, and the Republican-dominated General Assembly passed it, and he signed it into law. But after it was voted down, a huge majority by the voters in a referendum, he did acknowledge that he misread this whole issue. But here's what people who were critical of you said, and said to me was, because the law that was SB 5, Senate Bill 5, would have stripped the state's 350,000 public employees of most of their collective bargaining rights and forced workers to pay at least 15% of their healthcare costs. And it almost seemed that in an area, in a heavily labor area like the Mahoning Valley, people were looking to you for leadership. They were looking to you to speak because of your background, because of your history. And when you didn't, I think a lot of people felt betrayed, right?
That's one of those times when you wish you could go back in time, because I guess, and I'm just going to say it, I didn't have the guts to do it. I was so worried that the university would be, like I say, punished, money would be taken away, so on. And it would have been my fault because I was out there big time. I would do that now. I would get out there and I would say it now and let the chips fall where they may. If somebody wanted to, somebody higher up wanted to rip us apart, people were going to be able to see why they were doing that. But I should have. I'd be happy to admit that. Absolutely. Because I didn't believe in it. And I made that perfectly clear at IUC and to the governor. I went down and spoke to the governor and indicated that this is not how we do things at Youngstown State. Not at all.
And what was his response to you?
He just reiterated what his challenge was, and he thanked me for giving him my opinion and all. And the next day, in the headlines of the paper, there it was. So that was a 6-hour drive lost as far as I was concerned.
And then you had made mention earlier on about the faculty negotiations. and they were involved in negotiations, but that during those negotiations, the federal government warned that if there was a strike, financing student funds, student support for financial support for students would be withheld or dried up, and that became a concern of yours. A lot of faculty members thought that that was blackmail in effect.
Yeah.
Uh, so what was your relationship with the faculty and the faculty union?
This is one of those times when, again, Ikram Khawaja asked me to be the lead negotiator for the administration for the 2008 negotiations. And I'm big on that word no, because I'd never been involved in negotiations before. And he said, no, you have a good relationship. You need to do this. And again, I told him no, but you saw how that worked out. Okay, so anyhow, and the faculty, if you remember, were mad, because not about me, but they were mad from 2005. As a matter of fact, it's my understanding, I heard from some of them that they had no intention of even coming to the negotiating table in 2008. So I was worried as could be that, the administrative team was going to be sitting there all by themselves. We showed up. I talked about what my philosophy of negotiations was. Stan Gazelle sat beside me, God rest his soul. Stan and I had a good relationship. I was actually one of his students. He said, we're together on all of this. Well, so the following day, we had another negotiation session, on and on and on down the line. Realized that negotiations started in August. We were done before the beginning of the year. We were finished. Now, I don't think that that's happened in the past. I'm thinking that it hadn't. I'm not positive, but for the most part, we had ironed out our issues. And I believe that I believe that I had a good relationship with the faculty. When I became president, I think you need to realize that actually, I had very little to do with negotiations. I had very little to do with even determining what we were going to negotiate. They called in an attorney from Cleveland and worked with our attorney and our human resources people and the board. And yes, I was there, but people think, well, she can point her finger and that's final. That's not the case whatsoever. So I sure was hoping that people knew me well enough to know that I agreed with some things and I didn't agree with many of the other. I was a faculty member. My goodness, why would I ever want to hurt my own colleagues? So that was a hurtful time in my presidency, I must say. I felt bad about all of that.
But the reality that was confronting higher education during your tenure as president is still the reality today. It's declining enrollment, declining revenue, declining state aid. You go down the list, and the things that you had to confront and contend with are still things that institutions of higher education have to contend with today, right?
Yes, absolutely. And for the foreseeable future, I don't see a change. Look at the cost of higher education. And I know we're going back many, many years, but when I started at YSU, it was $150 a quarter. It's my understanding we're close to $12,000 a year now. That's unbelievable. And students are, graduating with debt, and you have debt. You're going to a job and you got a long time to go before you have your debt paid off. It's very sad. When I got my doctorate at Akron, I was fortunate enough to have an internship there. And so that certainly helped a lot, but I do feel for these students today. And again, the administrators are facing the exact same problems as we did a decade ago and maybe 2 decades ago. Right. Like I say, we're always cutting budgets. We always have to figure out what's the least important that we can possibly cut. And that's so sad. My goodness.
And when you make cuts, those cuts reflect your vision, the university's vision, the university's philosophy, which brings me to what's going on at YSU today. Now, I'm sure you're aware of the controversy surrounding the appointment of the current president, former Republican right-wing Congressman Bill Johnson. The fact that the trustees, unlike the board that appointed you, shrouded this appointment in secrecy has permanently damaged YSU's reputation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like your honest appraisal of what has transpired.
Well, first of all, I will say that unfortunately, I think that President Johnson, as well as the YSU community and the Youngstown community at large, were very much hurt by all of this. How do you gain respect for an individual? You get to know that individual. You don't pull somebody just out and say, this is your president. No. Again, and you said it earlier, I went through 2 days of meeting with people on campus, off campus, and there were more days talking to, I'll say, community groups than just that. To just plop somebody in, and I don't mean to use that term bad in a bad way, but to do that, you've cheated not only the campus and the faculty and staff and the community, you've cheated that individual as well. They haven't had an opportunity to get to know what that community is all about. And YSU has some phenomenal tradition. It has a phenomenal heritage, not just because I'm a former YSU student. It's a phenomenal university. The Dana School of Music, my goodness,
Yes.
the school that really defined YSU for a long time. They should be held up on a pedestal,
Right.
and yet we're going to do something to them that's harmful. I don't agree with that. Don't like it, and it's hurtful to the campus. It's hurtful to those students. It's hurtful to the entire university, and it's hurtful to our reputation. And university's reputation, that's what you have. I've said this 1 million times. Universities have to define themselves. They have to decide what it is they're going to be. They cannot be all things to all people. So you have to decide what it is you're good at and what it is you want to do and what you want to be. Being the jack of all trades doesn't cut it, because you will be a master of none. And we know that. I don't mean to use that as a cliche, but you can't be everything to everyone. So you take a look at what your mission statements were and your mission and goal statements, and you stay with that. You can't get an associate degree at Harvard or Princeton or Yale. They have defined themselves, and people can say, well, those are the Ivy League. It doesn't matter whether you're Ivy League or what. It's the same at a university. And again, I've said this 1 million times, and I'm sure people are so bored of hearing this, but we educate, we don't train. And we've always believed that. When Jim Scanlon, B.G. Bowers, and myself were working on the mission and goals back in 1993 and 94, we literally went to every single department on that campus. We made sure that everyone had the opportunity to tell us what their vision, what they wanted to see for YSU. And it was educating students, not training, educating. The community colleges, the technical schools do a fantastic job of that. They prepare students to come to our university, and that's what it was supposed to be all about. And I really hope we don't get away from that. That's very worrisome. It takes money to be all things to all people, and you can't do it. You just can't do it. And boy, did I just bluster. You asked a very simple question, and I just went off on a rampage there.
That's exactly the answer I wanted, because when you were first appointed president, your very first address to the university that the presidents give after being appointed. You shared your vision for YSU, and you talked about student-centered higher education, where students come first. And you talked about, the history of YSU and the grand traditions and all of that. It almost seems that vision no longer exists, that they're flailing around trying to find out what YSU should be. And in my mind, that's a mistake. Am I right in that?
I believe it is a mistake. I believe that you're right in that. We know what we are. No matter what anyone says, we have graduated phenomenal students. They have succeeded not only at their jobs, they've succeeded with having a wonderful life. Look at the blogs and look on Facebook what people have to say about their YSU education. We don't need to refigure out what it is our mission is. Mm-hmm. We can do some different things sometimes, but we know what we are good at and what we are. And we have to stay with that. We need to stay with that. You can't change what you are every single year or every single time some new fad comes along. And I do refer to that as a fad because sometimes these things last for a year, they last 2 years, and then all of a sudden you've initiated this program at your institution and now it's not needed anymore. We educate. We don't take a look at, okay, this is popular right now, let's start a program. No, we know what we are and we're good at it. We are good at it. We've always been. And see, once again, you got a lecture.
No, and the issue of education and higher education. I know the word higher is sort of, to me, is key. It is about not only preparing students for the world, but even expanding their own sort of minds and expanding the experiences and all of that. And it almost seems as though there is a move afoot nationally, especially among conservatives, who want to redefine higher education, who feel that, get rid of all of the liberal arts, get rid of humanities, get rid of all of the, speak to that with your background and experience.
Well, again, I've always said that just as much education takes place outside of the classroom as takes place inside the classroom. So I'm going to go into a training program that these folks are talking about. And that's all I'm going to know. Yeah. I'm not going to know the beauty of history, the history of art. I'm not going to know the beauty of music and geography and politics and social studies. I won't get that because that's not what you do in training. And we're going to graduate people and they may get a job for a little bit until those particular jobs run out. And then again, are they having a wonderful life? I have always believed that education and higher education specifically is about having a wonderful life, developing yourself, developing values. Again, I went to YSU during the late 60s and 70s and what was going on, the Vietnam War. And I will tell you that to this day, I contend that that's when my values were set. I decided what I believed in, what I didn't believe in, what my values were. When are these students who are getting trained going to have that opportunity? That's what education is all about, inside the classroom and outside. And, YSU has these wonderful professors who are willing to spend extra time, not just in the classroom, but in organizations and in groups and helping students. And you don't have that at every university, but we have it. We had it. I haven't been there for 10 years, so I'm speaking out of turn. I realize that. But the students took advantage of that too. We had wonderful organizations with wonderful faculty advisors who participated, who supported student programs. My goodness, I just had a text message from a good friend back there who said, we just had Greek Sing. And here's a list of the winners. And no sooner did he text message me that, I got an email from one of my former students, Dr. Anderson, we just had Greek Sing, and guess who won? I mean, those are the things that are extra, that are out there to really make a difference in a person's life. They'll remember those things.
And
forever.
And yet today, the trustees and the administration led by Mr. Johnson are talking about creating a community college to replace Eastern Gateway. In other words, going into a two-year institution, creating a two-year institution. How does that make you feel?
My question is, where's the money coming from? We're cutting faculty positions. People are taking buyouts. We're talking about doing things that are going to hurt the Dana School of Music, but we're going to start a community college. That's my question. I mean, if you got billions of dollars and you want to do something, right. I still don't believe in that, but okay. But it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. Community colleges do wonderful things, and they were established to help students with that it was called post-secondary transition, right. Go from high school to community college into a university. And they do that great. That's fine. That's where it needs to stay. I don't know that we have money. We used to do a lot of remedial education. It was costing us an arm and a leg. We had to get our students to get the remedial education elsewhere and come into YSU. And they did. It was fine.
So, and we are going to have another opportunity to speak again, and I'm looking forward to that. But finally, in the midst of all of this controversy over Bill Johnson's appointment, I don't know if you're aware, but a videotape of you appeared, was resurrected on YouTube, and it was you presiding over the graduation ceremony, where an honorary degree was given to Youngstown native and award-winning actor Ed O'Neill. And he gave a great speech, and he was funny, as he always is, and all of that. And there was you standing there, presiding over that. Ed, who has taken great exception to what the Board of Trustees has done, great exception to the appointment of Bill Johnson, a right-wing Republican ex-congressman, has given back that honorary degree, and in fact has sent it to a student leader with a wish that perhaps during graduation next month, they have a little ceremony where they burn the diploma.
Oh no. See, there are times when I'm happy I'm not there too.
Because he is highly, highly offended, as were other very prominent people who had connections to YSU, who have walked away. And indeed, from what I'm told, a lot of the members of the money class have made it known that they're no longer interested in supporting YSU. That's a sad situation, isn't it?
It's a tragic situation. First of all, when someone gives money, I hope they're giving it for all the right reasons. And I know that our YSU donors do. They give it to help our students. Ed O'Neill is one of these people who he stands up as a role model. I mean, look what you can be. He came to YSU. He was this, he was that. And there he is on television. And, we have so many examples of those kind of people from Youngstown State. It really did sadden me. I wish Mr. O'Neill, and he has my phone number, I have his, had called me before he did all of that. I would have tried to tell him to just keep it, maybe put it in the closet if you have to, but just keep the thing. Again, it sends out a bad message to our students. And again, if we are going to be role models, let's be careful. You know, the flip side of that is people are taking a stand, and students should. So, you know, there's always a good side, and it's everybody's opinion. I just never want those students to get hurt. And at a time when everybody's vying for that almighty dollar, and everybody's looking for more and more support on campus, boy, what a tragedy. Absolutely, what a tragedy.
Well,
I apologize for drinking my water here. It is so dry here. It isn't funny.
I can tell. I didn't realize how dry it is.
And I'm not a water drinker. Oh my gosh, but it is so dry today. Oh my gosh. So
Cindy, listen, I'm glad I got to see you again after this time, this amount of time. I always, you know, enjoyed working with you. I mean, I respected you for even when you were criticized by me and by the Vindicator. You'd never held a grudge. You came to the editorial board. You sat down with us. You understood we had a role to play, as did you. And I think that was important. And again, thank you for spending this time with me. I hope your knowledge and thoughtful views will inspire, well, I'm not holding my breath, the current Board of Trustees and the current president to reassess their vision for YSU, because I think it's important. I think it's important for the reputation of the university. That is such an important part of the community. But again, thank you so much. And
thank you so much.
Okay.
This has been wonderful. Thank you so very much, Bertram. I look forward to speaking with you again.
We will. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.